Hey everyone, as always Jarek here, and welcome to a real first-person shooter on the Wii. I've been having a lot of fun recently catching up on all those games I missed. Believe it or not, I just wasn't into the Wii back in the day. I was too busy playing Half-Life, Halo, Call of Duty, games for the quote-unquote hardcore gamer, and the Wii just didn't really offer much of that. I also wasn't really interested in the gimmicky controls, or so I thought at the time. The Wii, I think, as a console is a lot more interesting to look at now that we have more hindsight. It's a really interesting console that really nothing else did. Before I go into a big rant, I need to thank today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is NordVPN. What is a VPN? VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. It hides your virtual location, hides your IP address, and encrypts your data, which is an unfortunate necessity in this day. While this is helpful at home, it's even more important in a public location like an airport, where anyone would be able to see your data otherwise. But there's more benefits to this than just security. It does hide your location, but it shows your location in a totally different spot. For example, if you want to watch a YouTube video or a Netflix show, but it's blocked in your country, well, in a few clicks, you can change where you live, according to the internet, and watch that video. I really can't stress how easy this is. It really is just a few clicks and then the internet thinks you're somewhere totally different. And speaking of different locations, there are 5,200 plus fast servers in 59 different countries, and you can make your connection even faster with NordLynx. NordVPN has a 30-day money-back guarantee. It doesn't log any of your data. You can have up to 6 different simultaneous connections. There's double data encryption to be truly anonymous, and a cybersec suite which acts as an ad blocker. If you want to try NordVPN for yourself, go to nordvpn.com/Jarek or use code Jarek to get a 2-year deal with a huge discount plus 1 month free. Again, huge thanks to NordVPN. This channel could not exist without sponsors like NordVPN. Unfortunately, it is true that Nintendo for the most part just didn't advertise to my demographic, which is the main reason I didn't play it a whole lot. I'm not really interested in family-friendly games. I mean, let's be real. Family-friendly games are games mostly made for kids that won't drive their parents crazy. I am neither a child or a parent, so they've never really interested me. But nowadays I kinda wish I did pay attention, because there are a handful of games on the Wii that are genuinely fun, that I just didn't play. So I've been really enjoying catching up on the Zelda games that I missed, and the Metroid Prime trilogy, and more relevant to this video, Conduit 1 and 2. In fact, there are shooters on the Wii that are for the hardcore audience. The Conduit 1 is arguably the first shooter made for the hardcore audience released on the Wii. And yes, I know there are a bunch of games ported to the Wii, like all the Call of Duty games on the Wii. I don't care. There's not really much reason to play it on the Wii other than novelty aspect if I can just play it on PC instead. So I'm curious. I might dedicate this entire month to just Wii first-person shooters. There's the Conduit 1 and 2, Red Steel 1 and 2, there's a Medal of Honor game. I don't know if people would start feeling the burnout of covering that many one after another. I can only post once a week, so that really would just be a month of Wii first-person shooters. So I really want to know in the comments if you guys are actually interested or not. If you aren't interested, then I'll space them out accordingly. If you are, then I'll just keep going. Anyway, let's talk about the Conduit. As I mentioned, the Conduit is a first-person shooter made exclusively for the Wii. This released back in July of 2009. It's kind of crazy that it took 3 years of the Wii being released before we got a real proper first-person shooter for the platform. That's the real reason why I never played the Wii. I mainly play shooters. First, I usually explain the graphics, but it's kind of difficult to explain the graphics for a Wii title. The Wii was always doing its own thing, and Wii games just look worse than the 360 and PS3 counterparts. So really here we need to judge this game as a Wii title. And as a Wii title, it doesn't look half bad. Actually, it looks pretty good. But I do need to clarify something. I'm not playing this on an actual Wii. I have one in the other room, it's sitting in a box somewhere, I really don't want to pull it out. I'd rather just emulate it and get the benefits of what you're seeing right now. I don't have a mod installed that makes the textures or effects look better. However, running things through Dolphin does allow you to natively run it at a higher resolution. What you're seeing is a resolution equivalent to that of 1440p. There's also anti-aliasing and anisotropic filtering. So this is going to look better than what we originally saw on the Wii. But it won't look different, it just looks more clear. I needed to clarify that right away, but then you probably have more questions. How did I aim? Was I just using a mouse and keyboard? Well, no. Actually, I was using a genuine Wii Motion Plus and nunchuck. And the way I was able to do that was with this little device here. Now, getting your Wiimote and nunchuck to work with your PC is actually pretty easy. These just use Bluetooth, and you can just pair them to your PC if your PC has Bluetooth. However, then you run into the problem of the sensor bar. Your sensor bar doesn't actually have to be connected to your PC. If you really wanted to, you could just turn on your Wii and put the sensor bar in front of you and that would still work. And yes, I'm aware of the trick of where you can put candles down, but that's never going to be as accurate or work anywhere near as well as an actual sensor bar. It is funny that that does work though. However, I'm emulating because I didn't want to deal with a Wii to begin with. The Wii in the other room is not mine, it's my roommate's. I could pull it out and use it, but I found the easier solution was just to get a USB sensor bar. There's a lot of these online and they're all pretty cheap. However, I decided to go with the Mayflash sensor bar because I know Mayflash is a good company. I've been using their GameCube adapter for a long time. It's a little more expensive, but in my opinion, it's worth it. The sensor bar even has a Bluetooth pass-through, so if your computer doesn't have Bluetooth, you can sync it right to the sensor bar itself. In my experience, this actually works better than linking your Wiimote to your PC. That always seemed to be really janky and not work as well for me, but through the sensor bar, it worked perfectly fine. You don't even have to do anything. You just plug it in via USB, Dolphin immediately recognizes it, and it plays just like a Wii. That's it. So yes, as you saw on my stream if you joined me on Twitch, I wanted to get as raw of an experience as I possibly could while still getting the advantages of using an emulator. I typically would talk about controls during the gameplay segment, but since we're already here, let's talk about how this works. The aiming is typical of that of a Wii title. It works pretty much the same as anything else, and it's overall pretty responsive. It's never going to be as good as a mouse and keyboard, obviously, but if you just wanted that, you wouldn't be playing this game to begin with. The vast majority of the reason why you're going to want to play this game is because you want to aim with the Wiimote. Something a little bit different, something to help you avoid burnout in your games, or in my case, burnout in my job. And overall, it works surprisingly well. Again, it's never going to be as precise as a keyboard and mouse or even a controller with aim assist, but it's good enough to beat the game. The Conduit also allows you to rebind your controls, which I did pretty quickly because the default control scheme is pretty awful. This game puts a lot of things that you're going to want to do in combat on the D-pad. Naturally, when you're gripping a Wiimote, your thumb's going to want to be over the A button. To move up to the D-pad is really unnatural. By default, they had controls like swapping weapons and zoom down on the D-pad, which are things you're going to be doing a lot in battle, and I did not like this. So I swapped my controls around and found something that was a lot more intuitive. Once I did that, I really had very little complaints about the controls. The only two actual motion controls aside from the aiming is meleeing and throwing a grenade. To melee, you push your Wiimote forward. To throw a grenade, you simulate throwing a grenade with your left hand. Surprisingly, this works really well. Although in general I found it easier just to flail the thing around and you would get the same result. You didn't really have to make precise movements as much as you just needed to move it in a fast pace and it would do what you wanted. These motions worked almost too good because anytime I wanted to set these things down to take a drink of water or something, I would accidentally throw a grenade and almost kill myself. Okay, I have to be careful when I'm setting down the controller. Otherwise, I'll do that. That's so annoying. I need to pause the game when I do this. So yeah, as far as graphics are concerned, for a Wii game, it's pretty good looking. Even if you go and play it back on the actual Wii, which will look more like this. You can understand what I mean now when I say the emulator just makes it look more clear instead of modding in better textures or anything. And this really was the first-person shooter on the Wii with controls that actually properly worked. So as far as the tech behind the game, it definitely gets a pass. The story, though, doesn't really get much of a pass. Not so because the story itself is bad, more so because the presentation is so boring. The entirety of the story is explained to you through exposition dumps at the beginning and end of each level. This is a black screen with text. Come on, you could have done so much more. The story itself is cliche, although not necessarily bad. It involves an organization called the Trust Organization trying to take over the United States. They're somehow linked to aliens invading America and trying to take over the Capitol. If only they knew it wouldn't be the aliens that would try to take over the Capitol. You are, for some reason, the only one that can stop them. I don't know why. Bullets seem to work perfectly fine. Why can't anyone else pick up a gun? Why does it need to be me? That's never explained. So for most of the game, you're going to find yourself not caring much about the story. I will say there's a pretty neat twist at the end, but that's as far as it really goes. It does also end on a cliffhanger, but we know there's a Conduit 2, which I'm going to be playing, so we'll get to that soon. So yeah, story is okay if you actually look at what the story really is, but the presentation needs a lot of work. Now we'll get to the part that you probably actually care about, the gameplay. I had a bit of a honeymoon phase with this game. The beginning I found to be really fun. But my god, at times it gets really bad. A lot of the reason I had a honeymoon phase with this game is because I really miss shooters of this era. Linear, straightforward, first-person shooters inspired by Half-Life and Halo. We don't really get many of them nowadays, and this is sort of like a lost one that I never played. That's not to say it's flawless, because my gosh, it is not. But it's certainly not a bad game, and can be a lot of fun. Out of curiosity, I went to look up reviews of what people thought of this game back in the day, and it really seemed to be a love it or hate it type of game. What I really noticed in these reviews was the amount of first-person shooter fatigue people had. The common complaints I saw were people saying that it did nothing new and it was just another first-person shooter. Although occasionally I saw off-the-wall comments like someone saying that the art design for the enemies and the guns weren't interesting and boring. I'm sorry, what? The people that liked this game said that the game being similar to other good shooters was a good thing, not a negative thing. I find this to be really funny because through the power of hindsight, I am craving these types of shooters, and I got really frustrated in seeing all of the Call of Duty clones that came soon after. At the time, people thought Call of Duty was refreshing, mainly for the multiplayer. But if only they knew what was coming for the next 5, 6, 7 years, they wouldn't stop. I also saw people using the word linear negatively in these reviews, and that's really a product of its time. Linear used to be a negative word, and that always bothered me, because linear is not bad. But as Civi most recently said, people learned the wrong things from Half-Life, and they used linearity wrong. I crave a good linear shooter. As long as I'm still going from point A to point B, there's nothing wrong with a game being linear. You just have to do it right and not hold the player's hand so hard. Anyway, enough rambling, let's actually talk about the gameplay. As those reviews said, it really didn't do things much too different than what we saw in other games. It was a linear, straightforward shooter that had numerous different enemy types. These enemy types varied from standard people with guns to a whole bunch of different aliens called the Drudge. When humans were involved, it really was just a straightforward shooter. You have an exit in the other end of the room, you have an entrance, there's a bunch of enemies in the way, just shoot them and keep going. However, with different factions being involved, this allowed different weapon designs to be used. Much like in Halo, there is a completely different assortment of alien weapons. These weapons really reminded me of Prey 2006, not 2017, the good one. It also reminded me of the upcoming Scorn, which I'm still really interested in, although I don't think anyone really knows much about it. The alien weapons in this game are organic and squishy, and they make all these gross noises. I don't know why, I just love everything about this. Obviously, you have the standard human faction of weapons, an MP5K, a SPAS-12, a SCAR, a USP-45. I really underrated the USP-45 at first. You can spam this thing and it's pretty strong. Spam a pistol this quickly. But I never underestimated the SPAS-12. The SPAS-12 is the first gun you get in the game. The first thing you give me in the game is a shotgun, I'm immediately happy. And this one doesn't disappoint. It is always going to be useful from the start to the very end of the game. It's strong, it sounds nice, the animations are nice, it's a good gun. This game also uses an obscenely large amount of depth of field as you're reloading, just like Black did. I gotta admit, I have a guilty pleasure for this. I don't know why, I love it. It's objectively bad, you can't see anything and it gets in the way of gameplay, but it just looks nice. If you don't like it, I'm pretty sure you can turn it off. But there's a third faction of weapons, the trust weapons. These are more electrical weapons. Although they look like regular guns, they function totally different. They also have new models. They're pretty neat, but I think they're honestly my least favorite out of them all. Not to say they aren't effective, I just find them to be less fun. And I guess you could have a fourth faction, because if you find a secret weapon, these are basically overpowered versions of other weapons. Not really new ones, but still really fun to use. See, this gun should just be spammable, and if you hold it, it should be a charge shot. But if you find the overpowered version, it turns into this. Oh my lord, I held the trigger down because I wanted to charge it. Alright, well, this thing is absurd. Christ. That was supposed to be a mini-boss, by the way. And that's pretty cool. Or maybe you have the USP. Pretty good in its own right, but if you find the overpowered version, it basically turns into the Halo CE Magnum.
The West Wing is clear.
Holy. You weren't kidding. This really is just the CE Magnum.
He's trapped on board Marine 1 and they can't take off. We have to get there quickly.
So we've established that the guns are fun to use, but are the enemies fun to shoot at? And thankfully, yes. The regular human dudes shoot back at you. I mean, we've played those plenty of times before. I'm not going to complain that they're there. They're not really great or bad. They just sort of exist. But there are a lot of different types of aliens that are all pretty good. You have the standard small weak ones that run at you and try to overwhelm you by hitting you. Spaws 12 deals with them pretty quick, or just meleeing them. You have the bigger alien grunt type of enemies. There are enemies that roll at you and try to blow you up. They stop in front of you so you have time to react to them. You have the typical annoying flying enemy, but meh, they're not that bad. You have some heavier enemies that really are just hunters from Halo. You even get their arm cannon gun. When you pick up this thing, you straight up fist it. I wonder if this is where Black Mesa got that idea. There's some other enemies, but I think you get the idea. For the most part, they're all pretty good. With the exception of one. One enemy that I straight up hate. There are these smaller, fast enemies that are basically medics. They usually hang out in the back, they're pretty quick, the game is linear, so it's difficult to kill them. On top of that, they buff the enemies around them and basically make them impossible to kill, so you have to deal with these medics first. That idea on its own is fine, we've seen it in other games. However, the fact that they're so fast and small and generally stick in the back makes it that much worse. Though the truly unforgivable thing is that these enemies can one-shot you. And there is no warning for this. Now, the reason they can one-shot you is because the gun they use, which you can pick up, has a charge mechanic. However, there is no warning that they're charging this. You just die.
Stop being a medic. Oh my god. They just one-shot you. Those enemies can be super bullshit. I gotta say that.
A medic should not be able to one-shot you or even really be that great in combat. It's supposed to be a supportive role. Fuck these enemies, they're annoying as hell. But aside from that, you have a surprisingly good base. Something new? Not really, but you have different factions, different enemies, a linear layout. This could be a great shooter, and sometimes it is. But there's a lot of really baffling choices in this game that make the whole experience kind of annoying at times. For starters, this game loves enemy spawners. The annoyance is kept at a minimum because the enemy spawners can only spawn one enemy, and it won't spawn more until you kill that enemy. Still though, this usually results in you having to go down a linear pathway through these enemies to finally kill the enemy spawner. This is tedious and time-consuming. The small ones spawn out of an egg sack and the big ones spawn out of a teleporter-looking thing. You shoot them all the same and they all get destroyed. There's an entire mechanic in this game based around an object called the ASE. This stands for All-Seeing Eye. Occasionally you come across a locked door and you have to find some locks and hold down a button to eventually unlock the door. Usually during this time there are enemy spawners somewhere around you. That's not annoying at all. I do like that the ASE is used to actually fight some enemies. There are some larger enemies that are just melee enemies, they don't have guns, but they do pose a big threat to you, and they're invisible. You have to use the ASE on them first before you can shoot them. And this is pretty cool. But what isn't cool is the fact that there's something in this game called ghost mines that only the ASE can deal with, and it doesn't harm enemies. Yes, I'm not shitting you, there are invisible mines in this game, and the enemies are completely unaffected by them. Who thought this would be a good idea? Let me show you one of the more annoying times they use these mines. Here, you're in a linear alleyway. There are ghost mines all over the place, there are snipers above you, and there's enemy spawners at the end of the alley. You have to go through this minefield, disabling all of them, before you can actually get rid of the enemy spawners, while dealing with snipers. Who thought this would be fun? It's not even hard, that's just annoying. Let alone the other first-person shooter sins this game does. Like for example, timed escape missions that don't really clearly show you what you're supposed to be doing or how you're supposed to get out. One of these even has fire that instantly kills you, so you'll end up backpedaling into it, that's nice. But by far the worst part about this game is the random difficulty spikes. Most of the time, the game is still a fun experience even with these downsides. But occasionally, it throws you a random, difficult as fuck section that is not fun. The first one I experienced is all these enemies spawning at the top of these stairs. There's about 5 different spawners in here and you gotta get through all of those enemies to destroy them. At this point of the campaign, you don't have regenerating health yet, so good luck. But that's child play compared to the last level of the game. This level is straight up bad. There is nothing redeeming about it. It honestly feels like they ran out of time. The whole thing is copy and pasted corridors. You're basically almost only fighting humans that for some reason are bullet spongy and don't even flinch when you shoot them, and it just goes on and on. It has all the problems that you saw before of enemies non-stop pouring in at you and enemy spawners. It has a mission where you're supposed to escape at a certain amount of time and it's not really explained what exactly you need to do. I mean, it does, but not very well. Actually, there's 2 of these, and if you die during the first one, you don't go back to the beginning of the countdown to try to figure out where to go. No, you go back to the beginning of the encounter. So you have to fight all the enemies again just to hope you find the right way this time. And overall, this whole level feels like the odds were majorly stacked against the player. I know it's supposed to be the last level of the game, but none of the other levels were this difficult. Suddenly, it's impossibly hard, and in ways that feel cheap and not fun. This is where people start throwing out the words artificial difficulty. It doesn't feel like a genuine difficult challenge, it just feels like bullshit. Cool, I exit an elevator. I'm already being ambushed by bullet sponges. I have nowhere else to go, I have to go through this hallway. This is the whole last level. So yeah, this game is very much so a story of 2 tales. Some of the levels are actually genuinely fun, and I was really looking forward to playing the game. And then occasionally, the game is just tedious and not fun. I don't regret playing the game. It's not a bad game. I do need to clarify that. I was having fun. But what is there to complain about really makes you want to rant. Just gotta vent about some of the bad things in the game. I enjoy it more than I hate it, but there was clearly some problems. From what I've heard, the Conduit 2 is better, and that's what I'll be covering next week. As for now, please do tell me if you're interested in seeing more Wii first-person shooters. I do want to cover more, I just don't want to cover so many all at once if you guys don't want that. Big thanks to all you guys that hung out with me over on Twitch, twitch.tv/JarekTheGamingDragon. If you want to hang out in the future, give a follow. My subscribers get to see my videos ahead of time. Again, big thanks goes to my sponsor, NordVPN. Go to nordvpn.com/Jarek to get a 2-year deal. Thanks all of you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.